Hi there, I'm Rosemary Barton. Here's what's on a special post-Alberta election at issue.
My fellow Albertans, we need to come together no matter how we have voted to stand shoulder to shoulder against soon-to-be announced Ottawa policies that would significantly harm our provincial economy.
Although we did not achieve the outcome that we wanted, we did take a major step towards it.
There's a hard line when it comes to anything that will damage our economy, that we are not going to just transition our oil and natural gas workers out of jobs. We are not going to pursue a net zero power grid by 2035.
All right, so the results are in, and Danielle Smith has won another majority. Well, she has won her first majority, another UCP majority in Alberta. So what's to be made of how this might impact the rest of the country? You certainly heard some signs there from Danielle Smith. Let's bring in at issue Chantal Hebert, Althia, Andrew Coyne, and Jason Markusoff joins us from Calgary, where I was just a city I was just in moments ago. Jason, let's start with some of the language that we heard there from Danielle Smith, both last night and in her interview with David Cochrane. I assume it's not surprising, but what should Ottawa take from those signals that she's sending?
I mean, after 4 years of Jason Kenney and now the first several months of Danielle Smith, they can't be surprised by some of that rhetoric. They know, first of all, that nothing gins up a United Conservative crowd like that rhetoric, and they've heard it for quite a while, and Danielle Smith has used it because any premier, even if Rachel Notley would have won, they would have had some kind of edge against them. The people talking about because Alberta is nervous. Even Rachel Notley was expressing anxiety about the oil and gas emission, sectoral emission caps. So there is that anxiety. Of course, Rachel Notley will not have pushed it as hard as Danielle Smith does. Danielle talking about what Ottawa might inflict upon Alberta, but we'll see what that's the rhetoric. We'll see what the action is. Last year she had this Sovereignty Act. Right now she's saying it was an education tool. It's a symbolic thing. So she's toned down that. It's not really sure what her levers are. Of course, being upset and being very firm is in the fine tradition of Alberta politicians. But behind the scenes, this government and the federal government have been working towards some kind of solution, something that gets Alberta toward a net zero path without overly compromising the economy.
So what, Chantal, should the country take away from Alberta choosing Danielle Smith and her sending these signals about her approach to the federal government?
Well, for one, they should be looking to Alberta for a lot of political action, possibly over the next few years. This is a very small majority government in a province where the Conservative Party, under any designation, has taken down more leaders than the voters have.
Yeah.
And basically that means that it will be hard to manage that government going forward. But I think on policy and in the policy debate, the Liberals were probably more worried about Jason Kenney than they would be about Danielle Smith. The concern over Danielle Smith's premiership is going to be unpredictability, as it has been so far and as it could be in the future. And it's harder to deal with someone who is unpredictable, think Donald Trump, than with someone who opposes your policies in a cohesive, well-argumented fashion.
Andrew.
I think she sounded a bit tinny, frankly. It's not like she swept the province. They lost, 14 seats. She's presiding over a very sharply divided province where her government failed to carry either of the two largest cities. And to the extent they won in spite of her, not because of her. She wasn't enough of a liability for the NDP to be able to actually eke out a victory, but she certainly cost the party seats. And she's not in a particularly strong position because to the extent she was able to eke out a win herself, it was by essentially disavowing the Danielle Smith up until about 6 months ago, everything that she'd said or done before then. And so she's now in a position where they won the margin of victory was these 6 seats in Calgary that they won by a handful of votes. So she's got to be very cautious about doing anything to upset those folks. Yeah. But at the same time, she's got the people around her, the people advising her, the people in the Take Back Alberta movement who've essentially taken over that party, who are going to be urging her on and pushing her on to even further extremes. And they've shown in the past they're not particularly practical and not particularly forgiving. So I think she's not actually in that strong a position to be uttering these, issuing these ultimatums to the federal government. I think she's actually in a pretty tight confine.
Althia, your thoughts?
I think she may be laying down some of the groundwork in case the economic situation in Alberta doesn't necessarily continue. Well, it has already declined in a way. So I think that, you know, let's blame Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberals for everything that is wrong. I think that might serve her actually well. And I agree entirely with Jason. I think this is a very popular cross-partisan frame that she has set out. I also am not sure what Danielle Smith we're going to get as a premier, because Danielle Smith as leadership candidate for the UCP was quite different, frankly, than Danielle Smith as the premier in the fall, even with the Sovereignty Alberta First piece of legislation. So, you know, she's still somebody who didn't actually make a ton of problems for the government when it came to the healthcare negotiations. She campaigned on the childcare deal. Yeah. So there are areas of agreement. And I think we heard that from federal cabinet ministers today, talking about, well, I look forward to working with Danielle Smith on critical minerals, and let's talk about hydrogen. And, you know, there are other things that we can work on. I think perhaps the relationship to watch might be Stephen Guilbeault and Danielle Smith, who seem to have a bit of bad blood with each other. Like, I remember during the leadership race, he basically suggested that she was dealing in conspiracy theories, and she seems to have a very personal tone with him. So it will be interesting to see kind of like the subplots, how the personalities affect the discussions on policy.
Chantal, and then Jason. Yeah.
But let's be clear, when we talked about Doug Ford becoming premier and its impact, or François Legault being re-elected, the reason why that impact was important in federal politics was leverage. Why, as in, the Liberals need to win Quebec and Ontario.
Right.
They do not have much to lose in Alberta, frankly. And up to a point with Ontario and Quebec voters, there are more points possibly to be gained by standing firm on environmental policies than by saying, I want to be nice to get along with this current Alberta government.
Jason, what do you think about that?
But to a large extent, they need to get along with the Alberta government and do something. Because if Alberta is intransigent and is not a serious partner on climate change emission reductions, there is no hope that Canada can have at meeting its Paris targets or its other climate ambitions. There needs to be serious work. And there has been. I mean, this is the thing. For all the rhetoric from Jason Kenney and Danielle Smith, they have been working seriously on hydrogen, critical minerals, as Chantal was saying, methane reductions, and they're in widespread support of Alberta's industrial carbon tax. So, you know, I don't know if there's going to be some quick rapprochement on this sectoral oil and gas emissions targets. But there is work behind the scenes beyond the rhetoric. There'll be some new environment minister that Danielle Smith will appoint. Maybe it'll be somebody quite firebrandy. We're not sure. They don't want to be seen as being cooperative with the government, but the imperatives of industry working. Industry actually wants them to work together well, because they know that too much fractiousness, too much unpredictability is a problem.
Andrew.
She's got to be careful not to overplay her, what I say is not a particularly strong hand to begin with, because she'll simply be giving Trudeau what he needs, what he wants. You know, in politics, your enemies can help you as much as your friends. If she pulls out the really big guns and goes to the Sovereignty Act or something equally extreme, she frankly gives them an issue to run on the next federal election. You know, if it becomes the governability of Canada, not just meeting our climate targets, but actually how do we govern this country in a law-abiding way, he looks good in central Canada if he's running on that kind of platform.
Althia?
Well, I think the other part of this is that it will be interesting to watch how Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservative Party here in Ottawa, how close he's willing to get to Danielle Smith, and when it comes to the environment file, like where he's drawing a line. Because at the moment, it's just about scrapping the carbon tax. But if she really does take a much firmer stance, how does that squeeze the Conservative Party, and what is his positioning with regards to Danielle Smith?
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks, everybody, for coming in on a Tuesday, and to Jason, especially because he was up very late. I'll see the rest of you on Thursday. Thanks very much.